Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Comply with and Benefit from the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. We're excited you could join us for today's session. My name is Megan Billingsley, and I'll be moderating today's event. Today, we will discuss how to come into compliance with the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. We have with us Shyam Krishna, VP of Healthcare Solutions at Softeon, where he is responsible for directing the company's efforts across the pharmaceutical, life sciences, and medical device market. And we also have Deepak Gupta, Vice President, Chief Digital Transformation Officer and Delivery Head, HCI at Tech Mahindra, where he leads the strategic integration of digital technologies to develop service offerings that can enhance operational efficiency, patient care, and overall innovation across healthcare and life sciences. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items. Please note the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right corner of your presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click on the Help widget located on the bottom left corner of your console. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. Please know we do capture all questions. All right, so let's get right to it. We'll start with a brief recap of DSCSA. The Drug Supply Chain Security Act, or DSCSA, is a federal law enacted in 2013 to enhance the security and traceability of pharmaceutical products within the United States supply chain. Its primary objective is to safeguard patients from exposure to counterfeit, stolen, or otherwise harmful drugs. Its primary components include product tracing, product verification, product identification, detecting and responding to illegitimate products, and record keeping and reporting. Parts of DSCSA are already in place, but the Act hits an important milestone on November 27th, 2024. So, Shyam, can you give us a brief update on that?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So, the DSCSA Phase 1 was enacted around 2015, 2016 timeframe. And over the years, there's a general pharmaceutical compliance for all medications, drugs, and other forms, which are subject to the DSCSA Act. It could be injections, vaccines, and so on and so forth. The challenge was, how do we get to that perfection where we are getting to the point where an item level track and trace is possible. And that's also an evolution where you have to, combine technology, operational practices, processes in order to go to that level of traceability. But in 2019, there was this emphasis on implementing the item level traceability. And so the 2023 DSCSA Act defines how do we track and trace at a unit level, but then the unit is going to be packaged into different containers. So it could be inner cases and then outer level cases, and ultimately a handling unit, which is going to be the shippable unit. So this level of track and trace was defined and to be enforced in 2023, but it required a lot of change on operations, on processes, and on technology. So different entities in the supply chain, whether it's manufacturing or just distribution networks, 3PLs, they have to have time to adapt to it. Given the fact that there was this pandemic, and also in terms of individual entities looking at their own processes and technologies, they found that enacting it was going to be a challenge. So the question is, the 2023 Act is implemented, it's already officially on. The question is the enforcement. So there was that 1-year moratorium given in terms of enforcing from this November. So that kind of walks through the journey of where it started, the initial Phase 1 DSCSA, towards item level track and trace, DSCSA, which was enacted and implemented in 2023. but to be enforced in 2024, November.
Great, thank you. And would you say those folks are ready to meet these new requirements? And what does it take to be ready?
The answer is yes. The folks are ready to be able to adhere to this 2023 compliance. Why? The answer is there are several pharmaceutical industries who are who've been through this journey. I mean, big pharmaceutical manufacturers, entities, distribution entities. They were ready for it. They know it's they were following the lot level tracking, lot expiration date, etc. But when it comes to the next level of track and trace, all the way down to the item level, they were kind of grappling with technologies to adopt. Right? For example, there were few schools of thought. There could be a few entities driving the industry towards a particular standard. Then there were others who were trying another standard. So, for example, people were like, why not try and extend the EDI? Currently we're sending out EDIs, shipping, when we ship out drugs to the next entity, and then can we pack that information into an EDI, enhance the EDI and send it out? But the question is, which technology is prevalent and what would be the standard then became a challenge. So until such time, the industry, kind of agreed to a consensus that adopting a GS1 standard within that, what we call as the Electronic Product Code Information System, EPSIS, define how do we build these relationships between shipping containers all the way down to the item level, at not only at a lot level expiration, but serial numbers, case serial numbers, the contents of the cases, how do we serialize them? And then the standards in terms of, if there is a serial number repository, and then you elevate the technology with the serial number repository software vendors and the repositories themselves are able to interoperate and are able to exchange data. That's what we call as a level 4 enterprise serial number, management repositories and systems. All of those took time to evolve, and so the answer is yes, people have evolved into it. The answer is no for some segments where they're still trying to play catch up. They know they have to go to that level of traceability because 2023 Act is here, it's in place. The question is, how do we get here from point A to point B? And that's where there's still some challenges. If there are going to be people who are still going to be playing catch up, then the question is, how do they, buy time? How do they represent to FDA saying that they're here, and what is the timelines they have in terms of preparedness? But they would have to eventually. So the question is, how do the enforcement take place, and where is it going to go? Do people get a pass, or what form of penalties, what form of revocation of licenses, and so on and so forth is still yet to be really finalized. But the fact is, there is a small segment of people who are supposed to implement the 2023, but they're not ready yet.
Excellent. Thank you, Shyam. Deepak, you often help companies in the pharma supply chain with their systems and data. So where do those subject to DSCSA stand when it comes to the cleanliness of their data?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest challenging parts, right? So, for example, without cleanliness of data, without discipline and master data management, this whole implementation of the DSCSA 2023 Act can get very chaotic. What do I mean by that? For example, you could have, a set of 1,000 SKUs or products, or in the pharma world, what we call it NDCs, right? National Drug Codes. All are, distributed by a very large distributor or a manufacturer making a few hundred of products which are eligible to be reported or qualified to be reported on DSCSA. What they need to do are basically two categories of product, cleansing of product data or master data. One category would be on the product itself. So which means, how do I define a product code? Which essentially means that when you follow GS1 standard, how do I, classify a product into a G10, and there are different variations because again, these could be, standards, could be per package within US, outside US. Without getting too detailed, you could have a G10 with 12 digits or G10 14, so on and so forth. So, which means how do you codify the product? That's one thing. And then how do you make that, into a standard, right? Because the G10 structure itself is it's a complex product structure, including a check digit, etc. Then comes a few other data with respect to, product packaging, dosage, and things like that. That needs to be standardized. Or, for example, a prescription is coming in and then you're receiving a particular NDC, but let's say the manufacturer or the distributor is saying, oops, I don't have this NDC, but I have a substitute NDC. I'm shipping that. So you can use that for prescription. So how do you build NDC substitution? Once again, you're going to clean up the data. So which means there's a product level profile data, cleansing to be done. Then there are things which have to be done to meet the GS1 standard, which means, you have to have, your global location numbers. If you have multiple geographies where you have your warehouse as an entity or manufacturing as an entity. So global location numbers, global company prefixes, and so on. What if I don't have them or I have them in bits and pieces? Meaning I have 10 vendors, I ask them to provide me with GS1 standards. Do you have a GLN? Do you have a GCP? Answer is they may or may not. So sometimes what is the equivalent? All of those need to be discussed with the vendors before we embark upon the journey of the DSCSA implementation. So that has to be thought through. And my single biggest concern would be how accurate can your master data management be before you start DSCSA project? So that would be the key thing before we get into the implementation of DSCSA.
Deepak, any thoughts to add there?
Yeah, I think one of the most important factor, as Shyam said, the master data management. And I'll just pick a few examples and cases where a lot of customers, specifically when they grow organically or inorganically, have different sources of master data or item master in their organization. And all of them follow different standards. Standard in terms of how they classify the items in the right category, what kind of attributes to be managed, in terms of naming convention of the items, the descriptions of it. Then it also, how do they manage the serial numbers, these expiration dates. There are a lot of inconsistency also come across because they are getting this item information from different suppliers. So there is a need to have a standard format defined. In fact, of course, the GS1 standard has specific attributes, but then it's a basic requirement to define a right taxonomy for that. So a lot of organizations are actually spending, a lot of time to define this category, I would say classification category, defining form fit functions so that they can actually define these standards properly. Yeah.
And just a quick point add to Deepak's points, which are very, he brought it up very well. It's very important. Operationally as well, right? I mean, let's say I'm ready to embark upon the journey of DSCSA, and then I find that I have 20% of my vendors fully compliant, and I get, for example, the homogeneous palette, which has a single NDC, and it's got an outer label that's a GS1 SACC 18 label, which is nothing but a serial, standard serial, shipping container code, 18 digits. Everything is good. But a lot of times, so you would have variations of your handling units, right? For example, you're going to be receiving totes. The totes can have mixed products, and sometimes the tote comes with a label which doesn't conform to a GS1 standard. What do I mean by that? For example, I just have the vendor says, oh, okay, I've barcoded it. I slapped a barcode on a tote. I'm sending it out. I'm scanning it. How do I deal with it? Meaning, does it even give me a picture as to, do I have multiple products inside the tote? Or if there are product A, 10 cases, product B, 7 cases, the 10 cases, are they homogeneous? Are they having serial numbers which are contiguous? What is the worst case scenario? Do I open the tote? Do I open the product and scan? And what is the impact on productivity? Just so you have to scan the serial numbers and then say that I've received this. Because the biggest thing in the DSCSA 2023 is what we call as verification, right? How do you verify a product? In the worst scenario, are you going to open everything and then scan and then say, oops, yeah, I got it fine. I verified it. Versus, whether it's a mixed palette or whether it's a mixed tote or a homogeneous palette, there's a uniform standard, there's a barcode symbology which confirms the GS1, the inner contents, the relationship is standardized. So, which again translates to the earlier point on master data management is, how do we get there? I mean, today I'm in point A with this chaos. I might have mixed success and I have 30-40% of my vendors, clean. I have no problems. And then I have this 20-30% or more who have, non-standard pallets, non-standard totes. What do I do? Do I then spend extra warehouse hours in trying to sort this out? And then finally, the repackagers or small mom and pop kind of, contract manufacturers who are not even ready for DSCSA. You got these 3 different categories, even when you're tackling the problem of master data management.
So it sounds like organizations in the pharmaceutical supply chain have some work to do then on both the systems and operations. One task is getting better at organizing and managing data. Deepak, can you tell us more about how to properly standardize and manage this data?
Yeah, and as Shyam said, I think a lot of organizations are realizing that it is not our old manual methods of doing this, number one. So what I am seeing is a lot of customers applying a kind of a methodology. I would just pick up another methodology that is used, like a 4-step process. Step 1, to define a glossary, I would say metadata taxonomy of their item master. What it means, like the form, fit, function attributes, all the different attributes required by GS1, including location numbers. There's a 14-digit number which is calculated sometimes for GS4. Second is, how do you align the data which is in different sources to this taxonomy? So they have different sources of data coming from within the environment, like different ERP applications, supply chain applications, also coming from suppliers. So how do they transform the data set coming from different sources in the standard taxonomy? That's very important. And that's where I think a lot of companies started using AI for classifying them. Third is, have a single consolidated MDM hub where they can manage this master data. So it's not just one-time cleansing of master data or standardizing, it's also how to ensure it remains clean. So for example, when a new file coming from supplier, how do you ensure that it follows the same standards, right? That's step 2. Step 3 is basically define some governance rules in terms of quality of that master data. The quality could be in terms of keeping the classification right, ensuring that the attribute which are created or updated by different department follow some RACI metrics. And then finally, there's a resolution path of every change which is happening in the master data. And fourth, which is the most important aspect, how do you ensure this good quality master data is supplied to your supply chain applications in WMS, etc., that can be used specifically for the next operational processes. So we're seeing a lot of customers are understanding the need of master data management solution and applying these methods to keep the data in a good shape for the downstream application to leverage.
Excellent. Thank you, Deepak. So we heard earlier that many organizations are not fully prepared to comply with item-level serialization requirements yet. Shyam, what are some of the challenges they're experiencing in bringing their organizations into compliance?
Oh, there are several, right? First of all, as I said, the biggest challenge would be trying to look into each of the category of vendors, right? I would always, in my own experience, we did this multiple implementations. It's for a global 3PL, and then there were different flavors of problems or challenges. I mean, I would say flavors, in a colloquial sense, but the problems were different for different folks. So there'll be a set of vendors who, for example, would have 2 or 3 of their distribution centers, which are the more important or more organized distribution centers, setting up good homogeneous pallets. They report to the serial number repository when the batch was being produced, that batch allowed code, and then when it's being packaged, when the truck leaves the premise, all those are chronologically captured. But imagine, if they are, having their contract manufacturers ship out on their behalf, and they're right there. There's a lack of standard, right? So first of all, as a challenge, you have to identify, there must be a sort of a DSCSA governance group. We have industrial engineering and operations folks. I mean, it may not be groups or, you don't have to do name calling in organizations, depending on who's doing what. At least there's somebody responsible for ops, and like IE equivalent. And then we have to have IT, and then we have to have the serial number vendor who you're dealing with, because DSCS has always been there, right? At the beginning of the call, I said, right, you are reporting, the phase 1 DSCSA information in the form of the 3 T's, what I call as the transaction information, the transaction history, and the transaction statement, which is a declarative statement saying that, I, vendor, is, shipping this quantity and, of this quality. It's a declaration of the FDA, right? So we are sending it. So let's say there is a vendor with whom you're working with. Bring the vendor to the table, and all parties understand what are the challenges. The challenges would be, let's say if you take the 20-30% of the more matured vendors or manufacturers, and I'm the distribution center I'm receiving into my DC, if I can baseline those standards and then work with the rest of the vendors and saying, here's how my ASN is going to look like. Here's how my level 4s, enterprise seal repository manager or the software is going to expect, the payload or the message. What I mean by payload is obviously GS1, defines an XML standard, which is your EPSIS, which is nothing but, there's a structured schema with which you define what is being sent out by a vendor or a manufacturing supply chain, and to what is being reported. And then when I'm receiving the product, I do a verification and then compare it with what is being reported, right? So if that standard has been established, and then other vendors who are not there yet are going to be looking at those standards, and then we work with them. Somebody would say, my IT says that it takes me 3 months to even clean this up and give you this in this format. Then we work with them and say, well, what are the challenges? The challenges could be the same thing. What do I do in terms of GCP or GLN, or what do I do in terms of, the standards? My system is currently on, somebody might already be on a partial DSCSA for all you know. One of their entities could be, I'm sending EPSIS 1.0 standard XML. I can't even call my IT and then have them modify and then, adhere to EPSIS 1.2, for example. Or somebody would say, I can send EDIs all day long, but you're now asking me aggregations. This palette has this cases, this inners are discontinued. So we have to work with them and say, this is the standard and this is how you follow. A lot of those level 4 serial number managers, the final point I want to make here is they can offer some intermediate or bridge solutions where they would say, hey, we can take that burden off you. We can, have you use our scanning software where we could do that little ETL type of transformation, no matter how you receive it, how unstructured your data is. So there might be some ways and means of trying to cross this hump, to reach that end of the goal. But it has to be collective. It has to be understood. Is it an MDM product related issue, or is it a messaging issue, which means you have to have all the GS1 standards in place, or is it the software? I mean, do you have a software, or if you're in the process of evaluating, a level 4 vendor, then it has to be a collective thing. You cannot say that I'm compliant with DSCSA when half my vendors are not. So that's where currently the industry is going through these challenges, and then we need a strong software entity who can also not say that, give me this and it'll work, but to work as true partners. So that's where I would say the challenges and the solution towards, addressing those challenges. If I've answered the question.
Thanks, Shyam. Yes. How should an organization go about determining their own level of readiness so that they can create a roadmap to compliance?
First of all, they have to decide, let's say they have a formulary of, 800 NDCs or, national drug codes or SKUs, whatever they call it. I'm just using interchangeably the terms, but for convenience sake. So then see that, what are we doing in terms of reporting? Are we using, are we reporting lot level, phase 1 DSCSA? Like, are we sending TI, THTS? We're good. Then in terms of readiness, so we have a level 4 serial number vendor in our system. Now, how many of our manufacturers who are sending me messages are now sending me clean messages, and with a little bit of a ETL type of transformation, we can flip them into reporting exactly to our level 4 software provider. So that measures the readiness, right? Let's say we get it right 40% of the time, 60% is wrong. Why is it wrong? There could be 8, 10, 12 different issues, right? Transmission errors, retransmission errors, duplicate. We are supposed to expect the manufacturer at the end of a production batch, let's say he sends 10 pallets of an antibiotic. So he commissions, let's say, 1,000 serial numbers per pallet times 10,000 serial numbers. The commission it, reported to the level 4 system. The transmission fails. So where is the errors? How do you retransmit? How do you avoid duplicates? How do you avoid duplicate SCCs, for example? That's the fundamentals, start for the DSCSA, right? The serial shipping container code is the outer label against which we report all the child serial numbers. So the readiness is measured by, accuracy rates, errors. How do you fix those errors? 1 month, 2 months, 2 weeks? So categorize those errors, and that's where the interdisciplinary teams are involved, right? Some could be punted back to the MDM, some could be go back to the vendor and say, hey, why are you not giving us ability to when you retransmit the same set of data, do you have systems or error mechanisms to report? Third thing is performance, right? What happens if the gateway is down? And then once it's back up, what does the manufacturer do? Everything which is happening at that level is going to hit me, because now I get a receipt of 5 pallets out of those 10 pallets of that batch, right? So 5 has come to me, 5 has gone to another distribution center or another company. When I'm receiving and then I'm doing electronic verification against the level 4 system, everything's going wrong. So cascading errors. So the readiness lies in kind of dividing and conquering. So maybe do some pilots, where you see that, good results, learn from the pilots, and then propagate what you've learned. And then see, these are the common errors when we try to do this with 10 vendors, 20 vendors, or manufacturers or distributors, whatever the entity might be, and then see how we can fix it. Because a big bang approach to a full serialization without doing all what I've just described can be extremely complex and can be chaotic.
Excellent. Thank you. You had mentioned supply chain management software, and some, including WMS, may not be ready to handle item level serialization data. Can you tell us more about that and what organizations in the pharma supply chain can do if that's the case?
It's a very good question because I'm here to be, let me handle this very carefully because WMS as a product, by no matter all the reasonably amount, good amount of vendors, because it's mature. It's 20, 30 years. You name it, there's so many WMS vendors who can exactly do, traditional receiving, pick, pack, and ship. Now, what is the difference when it comes to DSCSA 2023? You're talking about tracking serial numbers, but in a different business paradigm, meaning you have an outer handling unit which defines, through an serial shipping container, the relationship of all the inner packages and the contents of the packages down to the last unit level. After all, what does DSCSA 2023? Is unit level traceability bottom up, right? Because why we're doing it? Recalls, returns, bad products, counterfeiting, all of those. I don't have to repeat that. But when you have this structure, going back to traditional WMS, right? You can take high-tech electronics. Do they have, let's say there's a WMS implementing high-tech electronics. Do they do serial number track and trace? Absolutely, yes. You can have a cell phone, which has every single motherboard or part, everything is serialized. Or you could have an X-ray machine, which has every single part of, it's a med device. It has a serial number tracking. But they are not DSCSA. DSCSA has a few different twists. One is we are not only reporting the movement of serial numbers, which means the product and its packaging and all the way to the outer packaging as it traverses through the supply chain, but we are also looking into the statuses. So there are several events which the serial numbers are being subject to. It's kind of analogous to blockchain concepts, right? A life cycle of crypto, right? Similarly, what are we talking here? We're talking about a life cycle of serial number, which means when there's a manufacturing batch, right? A production line is running, 1 million tablets of an antibiotic, and then it's going to get shipped into 1,000 pallets. So that means 1 million units, that means 1 million serial numbers get commissioned, or what we call as birth of a serial number, right? So when you're commissioning, so there's a commissioning process, and then similarly, when you're going to package them and then going to palletize them, you're going to slap the outermost, handler, what we call a serial shipping label, and then you commission that. So which means commissioning, from the point of commissioning, all the events are happening to it, right? So we're talking about, their picking process, their packing process. Finally, when they pack it, then you report, I've packed it. And then finally, when it's in transit, I've reported back to the level 4 serial number management. It's in transit. When I'm receiving it in the distribution center, I receive against an advanced shipment notification. I scan the ASN number. Then immediately I just scan to do the electronic verification. Not only am I doing a match, I'm also pulling all the relationships of that content. So how do I do it? I don't open it up. I don't do all the extra operations. I walk around the pallet. The system can suggest a certain percentage of inbound orders to be done because, if it's a trusted vendor, scan 20 serials, check it against the level 4 management system. Boom, it's done. Can we do this with existing WMS vendors who have the ability to handle events associated with the serial numbers? Chances are very low unless those WMS products are already tailored, configured to handle the DSCSA 2023, which, I don't want to name names, but there are companies, a few and far between to have gone through this journey because, as I earlier explained in the beginning of the session, how do they know the challenges? How do they know what to do to make them compliant? And then finally, does my WMS handle all of this? So all put together, I would say that there would be fewer vendors to advise, partner with companies, and take them through this journey. It's just not technology. It's just not the serial number track and trace, which we can do for several other verticals. Even food industry, you have the FSMA standards. Nothing is unique as compared with DSCSA, if that explains.
Excellent. Thank you, Shyam. Based on everything that you've shared, it sounds like moving quickly toward compliance could be a big undertaking. Deepak, how can organizations get help with that?
First, I would say that none of the existing organization doing nothing in compliance. Everybody's doing something. Okay, so it's not like it's something they are completely new. But I think what's important to know that a lot of organizations doing it in silos, and silos because of geography, because of requirements across different businesses. So there's a need to first of all standardize that, and for that they should start doing some kind of picking up a right strategic partner. And I think as Shyam said, I agree that the partner should have some pharma value chain experience. Somebody who has worked in the pharma space, understand how the different inventory setups happen, how the suppliers set information through feeds, etc. And then there's a need to do a technical assessment whether their existing systems are capable to manage the data, as well as, of course, the need of DSCSA. But the data management is an important factor, whether their systems supports defining the right taxonomy, classification hierarchy, I talk about attributions, etc., etc. And then thirdly, do they have a mechanism to manage certain governance workflows? As I said, it's not just a one-time process. There's a need to have a partner who have a knowledge of defining the right governance workflows to manage this data across that. And finally, the change management. It could be a change the way they are doing today. It's a change in the both people, process, technology. So they have a right mechanism to bring this change in the organization. I would say those are the key factors I would say to enable this.
Thank you. Shyam, anything to add there?
No, I totally agree with what Deepak was saying, particularly his emphasis in terms of how to partner and how to make that, and with a partner who's good enough in terms of making that culture change, working with them. Sometimes it can be very frustrating, right? You can expect throw a set of 100-page errors in terms of master data, and then say, I want this fixed. And then, the question is, without understanding, how do you go about helping them fix it, right? So true partner, works very well in terms of taking the customer through the journey, and with a good WMS provider. And with the WMS provider, again, being very generic, what I would say is technology doesn't solve everything, right? So for example, there are ERP vendors who themselves have a full absolute track and trace module, and then they would be, as a true global ERP vendor, they would be, under obligation to ensure that all the 2023 standards are available. And when they, send out an upgrade, then the users of those ERP products can comply. Then there are WMS vendors who can do that too. But more importantly, what can happen is, given that the DSCSA 2023, we're talking about product verification on the inbound side. More importantly, which I kind of omitted saying earlier on, I briefly mentioned the inbound audit, where you can say, yeah, I have a trusted vendor, I can do a 20 serial scan or 10%, of scans. We don't have to open the shrink wrap, take the cases out. But there are some other edge cases. I can't go into it in this session, but that's a broad thing as far as inbound is concerned. But when it comes to outbound, you have to pick and you have to verify 100% as part of the outbound audit, because whatever you're shipping to, that directly is attributable to patient present, right? Are you picking the right product? Are you picking the right lot, expiration? What is in the RX, or what is if it's a B2B, what is in the customer order? And you match the quantities, everything is good to go, and then you manifest it, right? So what really happens is the WMS vendor should be savvy enough to work with the level 4 CL vendors, not only of the customer. If they can say, hey, I'm good, my WMS product is good, the audits are working. Now, I'm sending my messages out, it doesn't solve the problem, because what happens is, how do you tackle latency? How do you tackle speeds of scans? You cannot have, in the staging area, 60 pallets waiting. It's a big LTL shipment or a parcel shipment, and then you're saying that there's a few seconds of latency or time lag between getting a result back from the level 4 serial number repository. Those are things we should watch out, and only people who've gone through the journey can kind of quickly react and work with the partner. And the final point there I want to emphasize is, we're in the age of AI, and we're in the age of automation. So which means when we are trying to automate the picking process, let's say we're sending a AMR, which is going to bring the picks and then induct it into a print and apply line. But between the pick finishes, all the tasks for the product, and then that gets inducted, it goes to a conveyor. You gotta finish the audit, and then you have to manifest, and the parcel manifestation could be through a print and apply. So it's a lot of automation is being now orchestrated, while the larger companies, I'm talking about larger companies who are doing the automation, are also grappling with the DSCSA 2023 enforcement 2024. So we got to understand and work with partners who know what to tackle. Whether it's a simple serialization solution, or a medium complex RF-based, or to a full-blown automated line where you do the pick, you do the electronic verification, the audits, and then the audits will then trigger the rest of the process. The orchestration of highly automated workflows, it's just a big challenge, but then it's coming sooner than we can think.
Excellent. Thank you. One more question before we jump into some audience questions here. We had said at the beginning that there are more benefits to complying with DSCSA than just avoiding penalties. So Shyam, what would you say those are?
Those are basically, what we're talking about is item level visibility solutions, right? Everybody today in this day and age, right? It's a consumer, social media active, hyperactive kind of age, where whatever I put into my body, whether it's a cosmetic or food or anything, right? I want to know its source. I want to know, is it safe for me, etc. Right? When that's the stage, imagine, DSCSA is all about patient risk, right? So what goes into my body is very important. So which means the item level, visibility is provided by the Act, because the Act FDA can only define that these are the steps, right? How do you translate the Act into implementation? That's where the item level visibility solutions through track and trace offers a benefit. It's just not to avoid penalties and so on and so forth. It's like, what is going to my arm, right? Or my body, whether it's a vaccine, or it's an antibiotic, or it's a cancer drug, whatever that might be. It's very important. And earlier on, like roll back to 2015, you can have a lot code and traceability. How do you track 1 million serial numbers belonging to, let's say, 3 lots? It's out in the market. Some of them could be in different distribution centers. Some of them could be in the warehouses. Some of them could be in the manufacturer's premise. One particular lot has a raw material contamination. The vendor, it could be outside the United States. They say, oops, this is carcinogenic, whatever it is. How do you pull the plug? So that's where the new DSCSA will then trigger how the serial numbers associated with lots. Obviously, lot level recalls is the only way to go about it. But then at least we know, the relationships, we know the visibility from bottom up, and then we can trigger recalls, returns, destructions, and so on and so forth. A lot of it is left to the interpretation of the manufacturing or the distribution centers or the retailers who are sending out the drugs. And finally, when we're talking about e-pharmaceuticals, right? So you're going to cut a lot of the middlemen in the process, right? So which means if there's a direct-to-consumer shipment happening, it's all the more important that whoever is receiving from the manufacturer and then doing a direct shipment to the consumer for that entity, then the DSCSA enactment, the form of proper technologies is very, very important. And we've seen more direct-to-consumer shipments and e-pharmacies and happening not only here in the United States, but in Europe and elsewhere as well. So I would say that that's the benefit rather than just, paperwork and avoiding, filing, proper reporting or filing, avoiding penalties and the enforcement and so on. It's more to do with how do we make things better and especially one last point is the time to market for drugs, right? So the drug discoveries are faster and the drug approvals are faster, relatively faster, the FDA approvals. So you're going to find newer biologics, newer drugs. How do we handle that? So that's where I would go. The benefits of the DSCSA.
Excellent. Thank you. We do have a little bit of time left, so I do want to shift to some questions from our audience. And jumping right in, our first one here is for you, Shyam. The audience member asks, how do the preparations for DSCSA compliance also fit the requirements for similar EU regulations?
EU, it's not exactly the same. There's a commonality. Falsified medicines directive is a lot different in EU. So I would certainly feel free to respond by email or any follow-ups in terms of how that works. But essentially, what it does is the individual countries have their own repositories, and then there's a European hub, which is like your serial number repository, and it routes it to individual countries like Netherlands or Ireland or Germany and whatnot. So the way DSCSA works homogenously within the United States is not the way FMD works, right? So which means the serial number repository managers can directly, there are several ways of doing it, right? You could use a global serial number repository manager who also has a module for your EU, and they can handle that. Or you could have WMS vendors who can confirm to a set of APIs. And keep in mind, it's not IPSIS 1.2. It's not the way we do things in the CSA. We do things a little differently there in terms of the message structure. How can we, communicate to a national medical verification system, without getting too complicated. So we have these individual national level verification systems. So we can hit the API, using API, we can hit that directly or through a EU hub. There are several ways to do it. And also, how do they treat it? When do you destroy a serial number? At the point of time when you're shipping to the consumer, when the consumer is dispensed with the drug. So there are very nuanced aspects of FMD, which is not comparable. But by and large, the principle is the same, right? I need to be able to trigger recalls. I need to know what serial number or medicine is going into the patient, so which means tracing it back. Also coupled with much more stringent laws because of the GDPR, right? So which means there's a data DPIA, there's a Data Privacy Information Act, and then there are the companies who are operating in EU, which means the distributors, including software vendors who are sub-processors for our clients. We need to have data protection officers to take care of privacy, which means a patient has a right to be forgotten. So which means you have to deal with not only PHI, HIPAA type of protection, but also we have to comply with GDPR. So it's a combination of, FMD laws in terms of track and trace of serial numbers. Also, when it comes to direct consumer protections, GDPR is more stringent, and there's some nuanced ways of handling that aspects of it as well. So generally, there are several leaders in the EU who can handle this. So I would rather stay away from naming names or even the methodology. But by and large, the summary is the European hub can do the routing to the individual repositories. The software vendors are free to directly interface with the individual regional verification repositories and report to you as well. And thirdly, without getting too technical, again, I can answer questions offline to anybody who's expressing interest. How do you handle exports? So a EU entity is exporting to a non-EU entity. So what happens? So a lot of those legalities are also part of the implementing FMD in EU.
Excellent.
Yeah, if that helps, because it's a large topic which can be explained easily.
Perfect. Well said. Thank you. Deepak, this next person is asking about master data management. What are some key areas organizations tend to miss when they're preparing to standardize and manage data for DSCSA?
See, one thing I found a lot of organizations tend to miss while they focus more on data quality and governance aspect is to managing the life cycle of the product or an item. It's very critical. We track that right from the introduction of a product to the point where we define different statuses, whether it's obsoleted or inactive or the expiration date is changed, need to be tracked very carefully and diligently. I've seen a lot of customers where having inventory, having 40% of the item are either obsoleted or inactive and no more available. They're still tracking it and losing a lot of time and energy and effort doing that. So I would say it's very important to track the life cycle of a product as part of their master data management program is critically important.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. It looks like we have time for one more. So Shyam, this viewer wants to know, what will enforcement of DSCSA look like?
It'll be initial penalties, maybe official letters, inquiring about the status of the DSCSA implementation. FDA can always inspect, right? They go through, they conduct an audit, right? So, or FDA, or sometimes, customers have their own audit mechanisms and entities to trigger audits for DSCSA readiness and also their follow-throughs. But with respect to enforcement, penalties can be kind of phased out because we don't know still. I'm unclear and I'm not the right person to say what happens in December 2024, for example. But I would assume some sort of a regulatory approach towards enforcement of penalties and fines. But then at some point, serious penalties can happen, right? So which means, an FDA inspection process can look into records of the inventory. They can look into the level 4 serialization reports, look into dispositions, look into what has happened, what product came in, what went out, look into where there are recalls, how was the recall handled. So a lot of it can start tightening over a period of time. It's not like, the hammer comes down immediately. I would assume that there'd still be several phased approaches towards enforcement, and there's a lot of learning process as well. I think the key and important thing as far as DSC, and this I should have said this earlier on in my discussion, is also like what happens when there is existing inventory, which is serialized inventory. Let me put it that way. It means that I have 6 months of inventory, but I'm on DSCSA phase 1, which means I have antibiotics or whatever it's a medicine injection, whatever it is, injected DSCSA. At lot level, I'm reporting, I'm complying. Now, I'm turning on DSCSA next week. I think I'm fully ready and I'm turning it on. How do I handle this existing inventory, which is not reported to the serial number repository? What we call as grandfathered inventory, right? So which means you got to be very careful in terms of how do you consume it, which means pick those, consume those inventory first, so that when you start clean, as you start receiving newer products, which are already reported from the manufacturer from the previous entity, and then when you do electronic verification, you're not going to get an error on a scan, because when you're doing an audit and hits it, for the newer ones, the ASINs are coming, then they're going to match it. So if your inventory management is chaotic, and that can lead to some pain as well, hypothetically, how can you go back months and try to fix things when there's an FDA inspection process. I mean, that's something I also think could be a challenge.
And Megan, if I just add, I think customers should look this as more like the benefits they are giving back to patient versus threat. How can they reduce the risk to the patient? How can they avoid the incorrect prescription, kind of picked through inventory? How can they better track the existing drugs through right data information? That's how they should look at it, not just threat.
Excellent. Thank you for adding that in there. All right. Well, that is all the time that we have today. If we did not get to your question, we will follow up with you via email. I'd like to thank our speakers, Shyam Krishna of Softiyan and Deepak Gupta of Tech Mahindra, for a great discussion today. We appreciate you sharing your insights and expertise with us. I'd also like to thank our audience for joining us. Today's webinar will be available on demand, and you'll receive an email with a link to rewatch or share it with your colleagues. After this webinar, you'll also receive a link to access the DSCSA readiness checklist via email. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.